today. I am Denzil Streete. I am Senior Associate Dean and I lead the Office of Graduate Education here at MIT. And MIT Mondays, it's interactive approach to talking to you about graduate school, demystifying the journey to graduate school, and usually a PhD by storytelling, right? So we have a guest today, Andrea Marcano-Delgado, who's a graduate student in chemistry. We'll hear a bit about her in a second. But we strongly believe that by sharing stories, right, of folks in our community, you can get a good sense of where folks are from, how they got to MIT, their experience at MIT, and hopefully there's something in their story that would resonate with you and your background, and that you too can see yourself here at MIT. As questions arise, if you can utilize the Q&A function on the dashboard in your Zoom and put the question, we'll try to ask those questions as they come up, or at the end of my short interview with Andrea, we'll be able to take some questions. And so definitely don't feel shy on asking those questions. And then the Office of Graduate Education here at MIT, we are responsible for sort of doing outreach and recruitment activities for multiple graduate programs. And so in addition to MIT Mondays, we put on events such like Grad Catalyst, which provides you with a really deep dive into the mechanics of applying to graduate school. And you should explore those as well. And if you are not applying to graduate school this cycle and you'll be returning to your undergraduate institution, we have the MIT Summer Research Program, MSRP, and those applications are open, and the deadline for MSRP is on January 20th. So with that bit of background, I'll jump right in and welcome Andrea to MIT Mondays. And Andrea, maybe as you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background, where you're from, where did you study as an undergraduate, and maybe what attracted you to MIT.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Andrea Marcano-Delgado. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I was born there and I lived there pretty much all my life until I moved for my PhD. And I come specifically for, if anyone is from Puerto Rico by any chance, I'm from San Lorenzo, which is a town in the middle of the mountains. And not a lot of people have a bachelor's, like I think it's like less than 20% of the population in my city doesn't have a bachelor's degree. So I definitely didn't grow up in a place where I could find a lot of role models, if that makes sense. The reason, so I'm, by the way, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm a fifth year in chemistry. I'm in the Drennan lab, which is a lab that focuses on studying methyl enzymes, and we do a lot of structural biology that if you're interested to know what it is, I'll be happy to explain. And in terms of why I chose MIT, so my undergrad was very unique in terms of like a lot of things happened. I don't know if you guys remember Hurricane Maria, but Hurricane Maria happened when I was in my second year of undergrad. And then right after that, we had a strike, and then right after that, we had COVID. So I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do like in-person research during my undergrad. But I had the opportunity to come to MIT for the MSRP program, which if you're not graduating this year, you should definitely apply. It's an amazing program. It changed my life completely. And when I was here for MSRP, I fell in love with the university. I really like, like the university is full of nerds, but it's like also like everyone is so humble that it's a value that it's so important for me. And it's also a very collaborative environment. Like you will see people in the business school collaborating with people in like material science and engineering, or like music people working with mechanical engineers. It's like very, very collaborative. And we do just do like a lot of random research, which is also very appealing to me. Um, and yeah, that's me.
Perfect, Andrea. So before moving forward, I just want to sort of double down on something you would have raised. So you talked about growing up in Puerto Rico in the middle of the mountains, then all of the turbulence you faced as an undergraduate, natural disasters and strikes, and COVID, right? Pandemics, right? Like, what kept you still motivated and thinking that graduate school was something you wanted to do, or that you could be successful and be at an institution like MIT?
That's a great question. I've talked about this in the past with my friends and colleagues, and I would say my family. Um, so I'm a first generation college student, well, grad student. And I've seen all the sacrifices that my family has done for me. And I just, after all those sacrifices, I cannot give up. So definitely family is a big part. Um, and also in terms of like more like about myself, I would say consistency and also like celebrating the small wins. I'm a big believer about that. I feel sometimes even with big events like big accomplishments, we don't even like I feel sometimes we are judges. We're always thinking about, oh, like it needs to be perfect or like I did this wrong. And I feel like celebrating small wins frequently really helps to change that mindset of like just thinking about negativity all the time or like I cannot do it and stuff like that.
Perfect. So you talked about MSRP, or let's just say broadly speaking, summer research, helping to bridge your perceived lack of research experience with the research experience you would need to be competitive in a graduate school applications. Talk to us a bit about more broadly why you think summer research is sort of critical for students who are potentially thinking about pursuing a PhD.
Yeah, summer research programs or like, research in general, it is very crucial for like two main things. First, because you really need to understand if you like it or not. And the only way you will know if you like it or not is by doing research. And summer is a great time for that because you don't have the academic like classes, exams and all of that. You can just focus on your research project. And second, because it'll make you a more competitive applicant, right? Um, like definitely in grad school, I mean, I'm not part of the grad admissions process, but I would for sure know that that research experience is important to convince the committee. Um, and in terms of my own experiences, so I also did an RU at the University of Michigan. I didn't mention that. And in which is also something that I recommend, right? Like obviously I'm talking about MIT here, but also navigate like and try to discover other areas because that will also help you figure it out what area like because also like location is important, right? Like I fell in love with Boston. I love the city and the vibe and everything. Um, so going back to the question, it is very important, and I would say mainly because you need to figure it out if you like it or not. Like research is not like taking a class, right? Like it's more than that. Like you need to I use a lot of critical thinking, but also be like very consistent because you will fail most of the times. Like you will have a lot of failed experiments. And dealing with that, not only like figuring out experiment, but also like psychologically, it's you need to be prepared for that. Not really prepared, like, just know what you're have like some expectation. But then obviously like throughout the PhD. that's also part of the process, right? Like developing those soft skills.
Perfect. So you did a couple of summer research experiences. You navigated the coursework. Talk to us about your experience when you were applying to PhD programs. Like, what was your process? How did you ensure um, you had a really fine-tuned application? How did you select the institutions you probably would have applied to? Talk to us about that process.
Yeah, so the first thing was making a list of universities that I really, really liked. And that list ended up being like 7 or 8 universities. I know some people apply to more, less. It depends on what you want. So in my case, I applied, I think it was for 8 universities, 8 different graduate programs. And things that I was looking for. First of all, the research that I liked. And also the location. Um, that's also very important to me, like feeling, because like you're not gonna be in lab all day, right? Like you will live in that city, so you really need to like it. Um, and then faculty. That's also another very important thing. So I made that list and I had that in that list MIT because I really liked my summer research period. I also had University of Michigan, for example, because I mentioned I did an RU there. And then I had other universities. And after having those, like, I just went to the website, checked all the requirements, and I started writing those like personal statements. And meanwhile, I was also applying for the NSF GRFP. Um, and if you don't know what the NSF GRFP is, you should check it out. It's a fellowship for grad school. Um, and for those are like, well, I can just talk a little bit. So the NSF, it requires a research proposal and also requires a personal statement. And the personal statement was it was a nice timing because I used that personal statement to tailor it for my other universities. And the reason why I'm saying tailor it, that's very important because you don't want to make like a generic personal statement, right? Like you want to talk about why specifically you like that university, like the faculty, research, among other things, right? I also talked about student organizations that I really liked in the department, and stuff like that. So yeah, like I made the list, checked the requirements, wrote the personal statements, and then I tried to check if the university had events like this, like MIT Mondays. So I joined like some webinars in other universities to try to talk with faculty or like people in general in that university. Um, and then I also applied for fee waivers to be able to pay all those applications because they can be expensive. So that was my workflow. And again, I would say like the NSFJRP really helped me to have a personal statement early on. And also in MSRP, the MIT Summer Research Program, they help you a lot for grad school applications. Like at least in my year, I don't know how it looks like for like this past years. But they helped you to write a personal statement, and also they help you for a research proposal in general that you can use for NSFJRP or other fellowships. Um, yeah.
Perfect. So, Andre, you obviously are at MIT now. So, talk to us a bit about what attracted you to MIT that had you say yes to the offer.
Yeah, so I talked about MSRP, but apart from that, when I got my offer, I just could feel they really wanted me. And that was like very important for me because I was experiencing imposter syndrome and I still experience it a little bit. Um, but because I was experiencing imposter syndrome, yeah, to me it was very important to get those emails from faculty and be like, hey, like, we really want you. Like, hey, like, do you want to Zoom and talk about this thing? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it felt so good and reassuring. um, so that was important. And also MIT just offered me so much money. Um, they offered me the Dino Science Fellowship, the Presidential Fellowship, and I was like, how can I say no? Um, so yeah, I appreciate it and really like that MIT was like very, I don't want to say pushy, but kind of pushy. Like faculty were just willing to talk to me. And I really like that. And also I when I met the students, I really liked that most of them were just like happy for new students, like their enthusiasm and and also again like most people were very humble and that's like a value that it's very important for me.
Perfect. So before we go on to what are you working on now, as you were applying to graduate school, are there any challenges that you faced? And if you did, how did you overcome those challenges?
When applying for grad school,
Yes.
um well, one thing was the language. You know, in Puerto Rico we speak Spanish. So writing documents in English was a bit challenging, especially like for, you know, grad school level. So it was a little bit hard in that aspect, but I was very privileged to get to know some faculty in my university that helped me with that. And I also had a draft from MSRP. So that was one challenge. The other challenge was just like in general, thinking that I could get into any of these universities. Um, and I remember, you know, like those last weeks of November, because the deadline was December 1st, I was just like, should I just do this? Like, what am I doing? I cannot do this. I don't like my documents. And like I just started to like get very anxious. Um, and that also, you know, it was really hard to deal with. But again, having like a group of support really helped me. So I had my friends in university, my family, and also like some faculty that they helped me to like ground and be like, you're just anxious, you're overthinking a lot. Um, read these documents again, and you will notice that they're like really good and strong for grad school. Um,
Perfect. And I'll just underline that for our audience that it's really critical for those of you applying this cycle, or those of you thinking about applying to a PhD in the future, that you should really surround yourselves either with peers who are going through the same process, but definitely with folks at your university, whether they be honors college directors or McNair directors or whatever staff is available in your career center that can really be good sounding boards for you and sort of fine-tuning your application. But also when moments like Andrea described come up where you're anxious or imposter syndrome is dominating, right? You have cheerleaders, right, who can encourage you, provide resources that could help in reviewing application materials, etc. So it's really important that as you think about applying to graduate school or working through the mechanics of applying to graduate school, that you surround yourself with community. That's really, really important. Andrea, so let's fast forward. You're at MIT. Talk to us a bit about the research you're currently working on. And why do you think that research is, one, exciting to you, but how would it benefit society, right?
yeah. Um, as I mentioned, so I'm in the Drennan lab at MIT, and we do structural biology of metalloenzymes. And structural biology essentially is to try to solve the structures of enzymes and proteins. And I always like to give this example of COVID because it just resonates with everyone. So, for example, when COVID happened, one of the crucial things was to try to solve the structure of the spike proteins, right? In the surface of the virus. And they used this technique called cryo-electron microscopy or cryo-EM to solve the structure of one of the domains of the spike protein. And from there, develop therapeutics and vaccines. Um, so that's what I do. I don't work with COVID, but I saw structures of proteins using cryogenic electron microscopy or cryo-EM. And in terms of what exactly, like what metalloenzymes I'm studying, so there's a pathway called the Wood-Yumble pathway, which is a carbon fixation pathway that essentially converts two molecules of CO2 to acetate. So you're converting a greenhouse gas to something like acetate, which is biodegradable and also attractive. Like it has applications for um chemical synthesis and also other things, right? Even food, right? Like acetic acid is in vinegar and stuff like that. Um, so I studied this pathway and I try to solve the structures of all those proteins. And those proteins, they contain different metals. So basically, I'm trying to capture in a picture how those proteins with their metals are doing that chemistry. And that chemistry is really challenging, right? Because we know that as CO2 is a very stable molecule. So breaking those bonds requires a lot of energy. So these enzymes are wild and they just like are able to do this crazy chemistry. And why is it important for society? By getting to know the structures of these proteins, we can understand more their chemistry and we can develop catalysts inspired by those proteins, or we could develop CO2 sensors or any type of device that can capture carbon. And actually, there are companies right now using this specific pathway to develop all of these technologies. So there's like people currently working on these, but there's definitely still gaps in terms of understanding the mechanism. And that's what we're trying to do in the Drennan lab.
Perfect. And I think you did a good job in explaining the chemistry because I'm an economist and I didn't, on a good day, I wouldn't understand much of what you said, but I think I followed along. So thank you. How did you end up doing this type of work? Is this something you wanted to work on as you were applying to graduate school, or you sort of discovered it once you got to MIT? Talk to us about that process.
That's a good question. And to answer that question, I need to go back to undergrad.
Good.
So actually, actually back to high school. When I was in high school, I wanted to study geology. I was obsessed with rocks and like dating things and like how old is this thing or like, trying to understand the origins of life. But the only program that had a geology was like very far away from my hometown, and I didn't have a car, so I ended up studying chemistry because to me that was the most similar thing. Um,
Right.
and like in undergrad, I just knew I wanted to study ancient things. And this pathway that I mentioned is a very ancient pathway. Like the chemistry is older than genes, and genes are very old, right? Like 4 billion years old. So that's something that was very attractive to me. Um, but actually, when I applied for MIT, I thought I was going to do chemical synthesis because that's what I did in undergrad. And in chemistry, so you have to do 3 rotations. And I did 2 rotations in chemical synthesis. And then this third rotation was in the Drennan lab. And to be honest, that rotation was like, oh, like I really like the professor. I think she's very cool and the chemistry is very cool, but I don't think I'll join that lab. And then for my third rotation, I fell in love with the lab and the chemistry and the project and everything. And I was like, oh no. How will I have this conversation with the other 2 professors that I told I was gonna join their lab, like very probably. Um, so, conversations happen, and honestly, at the end, like you need to prioritize yourself, what you like, and I just had the conversation, everything went well, and then I joined that lab. Um, so I was definitely not expecting to join that specific project, but I don't know. I just like third rotation. I really liked it. I have the gut feeling that it was the right decision, and I did it.
Perfect. And I think that's a great story, but a good lesson for our audience, right? That in the academic world, right? Not everything that you have the possibility of being exposed to would be something that you would have had any interest in going in. But if you remain as open as possible, you could come across great discovery, right? This is a good note for students who are particularly interested in summer research, right? The research you're doing now and the research you may likely be exposed to in a summer research program may not be the same. But if you enter it with open eyes and being willing to learn something new, it could totally transform your life, right? So the mere fact that you were open into doing a non-synthesis rotation in chemistry, you got exposed to this lab, and now that's your life's work, right? You've devoted 5 years to that just from a sort of a chance interaction via rotation. But would you say that what helped you in making that sort of pivot to this new line of research was some strong chemical foundations?
Can you repeat the question?
In moving to this new area of research, did you think that your willingness to explore it or the excitement you had in discovering it was made helpful because you had strong foundational chemistry skills?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely. But at the same time, there were a lot of things that I didn't know how to do. Because it's a biochemistry lab and there were many biology techniques that I didn't know how to do. So especially that first year was a lot of learning, a lot of learning. Um, that at the beginning it can be like hard to deal with. Because I don't know, for some reason, like when I was in my first year, and maybe this happened also to a lot of people, I just had the idea of like, oh, I need to know everything. Like, and if someone teaches me something, like it needs to be minimal. But in reality, no. Like, you really don't know, you really don't need to know like everything. Or actually, like, if you have zero clue of your PhD project, like when you join, that's also like very normal. And I think as part of PhD students, we need to give back. And I always think about that because, when right now there are a few first years in my lab, and they're always like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for your time." And I'm like, I was there too, so don't worry because I feel it is a duty as grad students to like be willing to give back and help those like people that are starting. So yes, like my foundation was helpful, but also like the mindset of I need to learn and I'm learning.
Perfect. For that reason, I'd like to underline another thing that could be helpful to our audience, right? Like there is learning that happens in a PhD. In some cases, there's coursework that happens in a PhD. So don't think that in applying to a PhD, you need to know everything, right? And I think it may, in fact, advantage you that you take on the posture that, hey, I'm a quick learner. I'm always looking for opportunities to learn new things because that's what a PhD requires. So Andrea, talk to us a bit about what your experience as a graduate student has been like at MIT. You talked about one challenge you encountered, which was not knowing everything that was happening in your lab and having to learn sort of the biological things or biological side of biochemistry. Talk to us a bit, yeah, just talk to us about, being a graduate student at MIT, what your experience has been, what are some challenges you may have faced, and then how have you overcome those challenges?
Um, so my first year was definitely the most challenging. And I really want to emphasize this because if once you're in your first year, you feel you want to give up, don't, because it's just the first year. The first year is always really hard. After that, it gets way better, I promise. So my first year was very challenging. Why was it challenging? Well, first of all, classes, um, the difference in language. So I just had to record my classes because sometimes the professor would speak like very fast. And when I was in my first year, my English was not super fluent. So I struggle a little bit. And also like all my classes, all my science classes, chemistry classes were in Spanish. So some terms I was not familiarized with them. So that was one challenge. And also culturally, in Puerto Rico, we're all Puerto Ricans. Most people are Puerto Ricans. So and here at MIT, the community is very diverse, like very diverse. So that was also a challenge, like trying to understand the different cultures, like languages, like body language, everything. Which I'm very grateful for because I feel that's something that has made me a much better human being. And just like I feel I can just go anywhere in the world and understand people because we have people from everywhere in the world here. Um, Another challenge was time management. In chemistry, when we are first years, we need to do lab rotations, we need to take classes, but we also need to teach. And you know, this is chemistry, right? Like other programs, they will have a different thing. So, you know, time management was hard at the beginning. Um, you know, having time to sleep because sleeping is super important, like eating, but like also like being able to um just finish all my deliverables and everything I had to do. Um, yeah, I would say like those main things. And after that, after my first year, you know, everything just got much better. You're in the lab working in your research project. Um, you know, definitely like, you know, some days are gonna be hard, like your experiments are gonna fail. Like I remember my second year and third year, it was mostly just fail experiments. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. Like second year for and third year, just complete failure in terms of experiments. And then in my fourth year, that's when I started um, to be able to figure it out what was going on in my research. Um, that I'm also very glad that it happened that way because I'm right now I'm very good at problem solving and critical thinking and learning agility because I struggle so much with my research. But it's supposed to be like that, right? Like if you solve a problem in 1 week, that means that it was not that hard or like it was not that important, right? Like here at MIT, we're trying to solve like really hard questions. And then and I would say like something that really helped me also is that when I finished my third year, I started to do music. I've always been a musician, a singer, but I stopped doing it in grad school because I had this idea of like, oh, like in grad school you cannot have hobbies, and you just need to do research and that's it. And that was such a big mistake. And I wish I could have internalized that before. So at the end of my third year, I started to do music again here at MIT, actually, in the Emerson Harris program. That if anyone is interested, I can talk a little bit about that, about music at MIT. And I'm so glad because I just felt way happier. And also like talking with grad students that were also like in other disciplines, like mechanical engineers, blah, 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 like other programs doing music together. That was so important in my career. And then everything started to work in the lab. So my advice is that whatever is your hobby, if you like running, music, sports, whatever it is, don't stop doing it in grad school because it is part of who you are. You're muted.
I should know this by now. So sorry about that. Thank you for sharing that about music. Along those lines, Andrea, can you think of what other resources you would have leveraged, right, that would have helped you navigate, even up to now, like when challenges arise, like what MIT resources or other resources you're leveraging to really ensure that you can do what you need to do and show up as you need to show up.
Well, different ones. So the for actually one is OGE, Noel that is connected here. I, you know, every time I have a struggle or like a problem that I feel I just don't feel comfortable talking it with someone in the lab, right? Because that will happen, right? Like sometimes conflict can happen in the lab, and it's something very normal. Like in the workplace, it happens also. So I always like reach out to the Office of Graduate Education for those things. And they have helped me in many different things in my life. You have no idea. Um, that's one resource that I'm so grateful to have. And also like your peers, like grad students. Um, when you join one, if you join MIT, if you decide to if you apply and you join MIT, one thing is like that community of your first year, like your cohort is so important. Because those are gonna be the people that understand your struggles. And right, like, every generation is a different thing, right? So like having that resource of, being just like having my cohort is also very important. Um and many other things like for example, I have a disability. I don't mind sharing that with people. And the office, MIT has an office for people with disabilities. And I'm so glad I I started working with them. And I don't know why I didn't do that in my first year. It would have been way better. That they've definitely helped me a lot with that as well, and like making accommodations and stuff. Um, so my first year was very rough, and now that I'm reflecting while I'm talking here, if I would have used all those resources earlier, it would have been way better.
Nice. Um, if there were one thing you learned about yourself during graduate school, what would you say it's been?
Flexibility, um, flexibility with many things. Uh, some in terms of science, sometimes you just need to try other things, being flexible about that. Sometimes you have to work with people, being flexible with like, the willingness of working as a team. Um, Sometimes you have to meet with someone at 7 a.m. and then I have to have a meeting at 7 p.m. because your collaborator is in the other side of the country in California, or like vice versa. Um, and yeah, flexibility, and I know is one, but another another one that I it's also competing with that one is courage. Like having the courage to wake up every day and doing your work, because I would say that for a PhD, you have your PI, your PI is there to motivate you, but like you need to be your main motivator. Um because no one will solve the problems for you. Like you have to wake up every day and be like, okay, I'm gonna work in the lab. I'm gonna try to do this thing, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. I'll just try another thing. And sometimes, like after a while doing that, it gets really hard. It gets really tough. Um so yeah, flexibility and having the courage to,
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. Two are allowed. So we're coming down to I probably have two or three questions left for you that I could potentially ask. This is a reminder to our audience. If you have questions, I see a couple came in already. Please utilize the Q&A function on your dashboard, and we'll get to your questions in 1 second. All right, so I'll ask probably a couple of questions around advice for audience. Knowing what you know now, what would you recommend our one piece of advice you'd recommend? I keep giving you one, but pieces of advice you'd recommend to our audience, as if for those of them thinking of applying to graduate school, they got like 4 weeks left. What pieces of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so one thing is if you haven't identified people to go over your materials, you should do it as soon as possible. And I usually advise to people, you want someone that that is in your area, right? Like if you're a chemist, try to find a chemist, a faculty in chemistry to read your application or like an area similar. And then just have someone else that it also has like the capacity, the level to evaluate your material, but that is not necessarily in chemistry. Um so those having those two people are good. And also like if you can find a grad student, that's also great because they can talk um about, you know, like recent admissions and how did they do it and stuff like that. So like finding people to review your application. Second thing is tailor your application. I obviously understand that you guys are using a template and like you're changing things. Like that's normal. Like when there's no way you're gonna write like an essay from scratch for every university, but really tailor it, right? Like talk about why you want MIT, like why you want chemistry, why you want to do a PhD in general, right? Because you could do a master's, you could do anything, but like why specifically a PhD? Um, and definitely like, you know, talk about like specifically like what type of research are you trying to look for, or like if you're interested in many things, that's also fine, right? Like when I applied for grad school, I said, I mean, hey, I have interested in synthesis, but I'm interested in material science, and then I ended up doing something completely different. That's fine. But you know, show that curiosity of learning, because that's the PhD, right? Like learning. um and my last advice would be definitely like do things early on. If you don't have a draft by this point, like you need to work for like as soon as possible. Um, because it's just very important to have things early on, because those people that are going to review your materials, they need time, right? And also your letters of recommendation. Tell your faculty, I need a strong letter of recommendation. And if you need to meet with them, that's totally fine. Like have a meeting with them and be like, hey, like, you know, this is my personal statement, and these are things that I would like for you to highlight. It depends on your on how close that relationship is. Like, you know, for one of my recommenders, he was my PI at the University of Puerto Rico, and I just told him like, can you please highlight this, and this? And he was like, that's fine. But obviously, like if it's someone that you're not super close, like it might be a little bit intimidating, but it's just important to emphasize that it needs to be a strong letter of recommendation. Um, and if they cannot write a strong letter of recommendation, find someone else, because that's not the ideal person. Um, yeah, hopefully I didn't miss anything.
Perfect. One last question to sort of address the people applying this cycle. As you look back, is there one piece of information you wish you had known going in that you now know?
There's probably more, but the first thing that comes to my mind right now is the length of the personal statement. Like I just had this idea of like, if they say it needs to be 1,000 words, it needs to be almost 1,000 words. Like if it's 1,000 words, just, you know, because it is, that's fine. But don't try to write more stuff just because you want to have 1,000 words, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
perfect. And my final question for you before we jump into some questions from the Q&A is, how do you find joy?
How do I find joy? Well, first thing is try to not work that many hours. Your brain needs a rest. And even though we all love science because we're here because we love science, we need a rest from science. So I do music, but sometimes I also need a rest from music because music here, I don't know why, but MIT like music program is really challenging. So it's yes. And just time to like just relax from everything. To me, it's very important to talk with my family, so I'm always FaceTiming them. I talk with my mom offers almost every single day. And it's so important for me. Um, I find joy on that. And also, I'm in my fifth year. I'm graduating in May, and I'm like just thinking about all these years, and I'm trying to enjoy this year as much as possible because I'm never gonna be a grad student ever again in my life. So just enjoying every day. And don't take it that serious. It is serious, but don't take it that serious.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea. I didn't know you before, and I feel like this conversation has definitely make me feel like, oh, I should have met you like 3 years ago. There'd have been a lot more work out had you done. But no, it was nice having this conversation. So let's jump into questions. Um, the first question is, do you have suggestions for applicants that did not participate in MSRP?
Your application is still fine without MSRP. I know people, and this is not to discourage you to apply for MSRP. I know people for MSRP that didn't get into MIT. I know people that were in MSRP and I did, it's like it depends on the person. Like it doesn't matter if you did MSRP, if they think you're not a good fit, it doesn't matter. Like it's not like you get like a batch or if like, oh, you did MSRP, you have more priority. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So if you didn't do MSRP, that's totally fine. Like your application is still gonna they will evaluate you the same. It's not, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, in Andrea talking about MSRP, that was just the journey that she took to the PhD. You can substitute MSRP for any research experience, right? It just happened that she got some research experience at MIT before applying. So I would encourage folks to definitely talk about the research experiences you have had. And for those of you who are not applying this cycle, you should explore research experiences across the country, right? MSRP just being one of them. Um,
Yeah. And then just to give an idea, like my cohort, we were like maybe like 50 or so, and only two people did MSRP. So it's not like they will admit like most people are from MSRP. It depends, right?
yeah, perfect. Um, So one of the questions says, thank you for sharing your struggles with English as a second language. I have found it extremely stressful to write the perfect personal statement. English is my second language, but I have lived here for many years, so I do not struggle with it. Nevertheless, when writing such a pivotal piece of writing, I get a major case of imposter syndrome. How was your experience writing your personal statement?
So in my case, sometimes I would write things in Spanish and then try to come up with a good translation, right? Like, because literal translations sometimes they just don't work. Um, so whatever is your native language, you can just write some pieces in your native language and start from there. Like just don't try to put your brain on like English mode, like think in English, right? Like just think in your native language and from there try to translate. And also um that's why at the beginning I mentioned it's like very important to identify people to go over your materials. Because definitely like, I had those people in Puerto Rico. Like for example, my English professor in Puerto Rico, I told him like, please help me. And he found so many typos and not only typos, but also like just because some things like when you translate them literally, they just sound weird. So definitely like reach out to people that can help you on that. And don't be afraid to think in your native language.
Perfect. Next question. How did you overcome imposter syndrome? I am feeling too anxious to ask my professors for letters of recommendation. I would just say if I would, before you answer, Andrea, if you are applying the cycle and you haven't yet asked for letters of recommendation, you're behind the ball. You should just write those emails today and ask them. But how do you overcome imposter syndrome?
Yeah, yeah. Like you should email them like this week, today, tomorrow. How do so imposter syndrome is not something that just, oh my God, I don't have imposter syndrome anymore in my life. Like you would tell with people 40 years in academia and they sometimes will experience imposter syndrome. Um, I think in terms of saying like how did I cure like how did I get rid of it? It's more like developing skills that can help you navigate when you're feeling like that. Like if you're feeling imposter syndrome, you know, like talking to people or like making a list, that really helps me. Like I'm a believer of writing. You know, sometimes I write things and I'm like, what? Why am I making a big deal about this? Like, and many other skills. Like, I also like I have a therapist. I feel like that's something that should be spoken more. Like, in like you know, it's normal to have a therapist. Great resource, and MIT has MIT mental health is great. It's for free. Like, so I use it all the time. Uh,
So maybe I'll ask Andrea because I think in for MIT Mondays, this may be the first time this topic came up. So talk to us a bit about how you find going to therapy, how it's helped you navigate these past 5 years. And was there a time that you probably didn't engage a therapist? And could you tell the difference between now and then?
Yeah, so in my first year, those first months, I was not seeing a therapist because I had this idea of like, oh, I don't need a therapist, like I'm not crazy, and all of that. Because unfortunately, I grew up in a place where almost no one goes to the therapist, like, and they're like, oh yeah, like that's for crazy people, like, you know. And it was not until my spring semester in my first year that I actually started going to the therapist, um, because of my cohort. That's why your cohort is important. They were your cheerleaders as well. Like they were just like, oh yeah, like you should go to the therapist. Like I go all the time. So I just saw like, oh, like a lot of people are going to therapy. Oh, okay. And then I started and it really changed my life because I've just developed like so many skills, and right now, I actually for my last appointment, I told my therapist, you know, this is sacred for me. Like this time is very important. Like I never cancel those appointments. Like that's like super important in my schedule. And and you know, learning different things like breathing techniques, writing, grounding. Uh, Also, like sometimes there are like very awkward and hard conversations to have. Therapy also has helped me to navigate those. Yeah.
Perfect. And so folks know that was really, really good, Andrea. So folks know at MIT, in addition to having a traditional counseling center where we have therapists on staff here at MIT. MIT graduate students, through their insurance, also have the ability to have up to 52 um, sessions with an outside provider. And if you should need more than 52, which is essentially one a week, if you should need more than 52, the copay is some ridiculously low dollar number, like $5 or $10 for each additional session, right? So it's a really, really great benefit that graduate students enjoy here at MIT. Final question, Andrea. Could you talk to us a bit about how funding worked in chemistry? Because this attendee is asking, will students be funded by a specific PI from day one, or do you figure it out after a year or 2 years? So I know you had a rotation. So talk briefly about funding in chemistry, and I'm underlining this is only chemistry at the point that Andrea started, right? It can look totally different for a new student in chemistry, and definitely in other departments, it may look totally different. So just talk to us briefly about how funding worked when you started at MIT.
Yeah, so in my experience, so I had the NSF JRP and I also had the MIT Dean of Science fellowship. Um, so I have my own funding. Um, but I can talk from like people from my cohort. So people from my cohort, like the first year in chemistry, you need to teach. So you have they pay you because you're teaching that first year. And then after your second year, once you join your lab, because it's not like you start first day of classes, I joined my lab. It's not like that. Like you join a lab in your spring semester, some programs even later. Um, and then your PI is gonna fund you. Some PIs might ask you to teach, but that's very uncommon. Like usually they have their own funding, they give you funding, you don't have to worry about anything. But in my case, I have my own funding, so I cannot answer that question that well.
Perfect. Yeah. So you should know, to the extent that at MIT you're in a PhD program, your program would have a sort of funding package for you, which would typically be described in your offer letter. And then once you arrive here, in some cases you'll teach, in other cases you'll do research. You may have an external fellowship like Andrea had with the NSF GRFP, but we also have tons of internal fellowships, including the Presidential Fellowship, Dean's Fellowships, the Office of Graduate Education that I'm in. We also have competitions every year so that you can get some fellowship funding, right? So it really looks differently for individuals across campus. So I would encourage you to look at the resources on the departments you're applying to website, and then definitely in your offer letter, it will go into great detail about your funding. So Andrea, we're just about time. This was a really, really great conversation, and I can't thank you enough for putting in that bit about therapy. I think it's critical, and I thank you for mentioning it. And thank you to our guests for joining us today and for your great questions. We'll see you around. Those of you applying to MSRP, there's some information sessions coming up. The applications are open. Some Grad Catalyst options are still available for you to register for if you're applying this cycle. And again, if you're applying the cycle and you don't have your recommenders finalized, this is the week to do it, right? There's just about 4 weeks left to December 1st deadlines. And so that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you again, Andrea, and congratulations ahead of time for sticking with it and for graduating next year in May. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you all.